So today, Andrew Perrin is going to go take us on a story branding journey, or whatever you may want to call it, just to help us get all on the same path. Good morning, Mr. Perrin. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. And coming up with topics this morning, and this is kind of a personalized one because I'm thinking about my own branding right now, but I wanted to take a look at what we know about branding, talk about it a little bit, and so that you guys can take a look at yours and ask yourself, as Ross is saying, the right questions. Is your brand actually a good brand? And let's start with how do we figure that out, right? I think and I'm going to come at this from a marketing perspective. I've worked with many different businesses, many different creators, and thinking about brands, conceptualizing it. I've helped clients go from nothing to having a full brand. I've helped clients have a brand, and I've helped them rebrand it into something else. There's so many different processes and methods out there to be used, but there's one in particular that I found that I like, and AWOL and I have both used this one, and it's story branding. And this is creating a brand and turning it into a story that has characters, that has an enemy, a villain, that has a character arc, a story that you go through, and it has a transformation for your character too. So the first thing I want you guys to think about is, does your brand have a character? And this is probably the most important thing, right? Are you the character? Is there another character that represents the brand? Is it a little mascot? Is it an animal? Is it a little chibi kind of anime avatar thing that gets transformed into Twitch emojis or something like that? Where are you starting and how are you building out your character? And notice I haven't said anything about the name of the brand yet. You know, normally we don't start with the name of the brand. And normally we start right in the beginning. If I'm actually going to pull up one of my old ones here, you start right at the character, and you ask, what does this character want? What are they looking for? What is their goal of even existing, period? What is the main thing that they're after? So the first thing I want you guys to think about is just that. Does your brand have a character? And the second thing would be, what is the problem that they have? So you have a character, there's something that they want. What is the problem that they're running into and why? Normally this is where the villain comes into play. Now Ross, I know we pulled up an article too, and I wanted to see, before I kind of do a deep dive, I don't want to make this whole episode about story branding. That's something you guys can kind of look up on your own. I wanted to ask more relevant questions for creators, and I know we pulled up an article that had some stuff in there.
Yeah, I got it open right here. This is from wordstream.com. It was actually updated this year, so it's pretty up to date. Not that would actually really matter for this, and they have a list of 8 ways to tell your most compelling brand story. And just running down the list real quick, I just want to run down it and then get your opinion on it. By the way, I had never heard of story branding until I actually started working with Andrew Perrin and Andrew Wall. And I was completely blown away by it the first time. I was sitting here thinking, wow, we have to have characters for this. And then to actually sit there and watch them put one of these together, it made so much sense. And it was so compelling that I had to turn around and do it for myself and my gaming brand immediately. And it's helped tremendously. So be serious about learning this. So number 1 on this list is know yourself. And it's kind of what you just hinted at with the character, Perrin.
So it comes down to, I think the choice as creators we have is the challenge is, are we the character, or are we going to create a character that represents our brand, right? And that's because, especially for YouTube, where we, the creator, we are the central thing. We're the face of it. We are, and we are that face across all social media. So I will take one of my clients right now, Peter Hollins, for example. For his brand, he is Peter Hollins. He is himself. That is, his brand is built around him as a character. Now, in the branding, it's his face, and it's consistent on every single platform across every single avatar. It's the same icon. It's Peter Hollins' face. However, he will be animated into like a cartoon version of himself in a lot of the different video stuff that he does. And so you can take yourself as the main character of the brand, especially if it's built after your name, like your first and last name, right? And you can create a character off of that, and it still be you as the main character. but there's just like different representations of you that can be used for marketing. One of the most important things is to keep your branding consistent across all platforms. Once you come up and conceptualize it, once you have the design for it, once you have pretty much like how you're going to write your copy and things like that, you remain consistent and you use the same brand name or try to get the same brand name across every platform, which can be challenging today in today's environment where Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch have all been around for a while, so it might be hard to find the same name, but it's so important to try for it because you need to be consistent everywhere. It's so much easier for people to find your brand that way. So, character. You can be yourself or you can be someone else. So, I don't have a way of pulling it up right now, but there's a Twitch streamer named Strippin, and his first name is Sam. Sometimes I call him Sam Strippin, but he's just a guy who plays video games on Twitch. But instead of the brand being around him and his face and things like that, he built a character that represents his brand, which is an anime waifu, basically, and you guys know what I'm talking about. Basically, a random anime girl, but he created her into a character. All of the branding is done off of that character. So all of his alerts have her come up and wave hi. All of the Twitch emojis have her face on them. And he created a brand using a character that he operates. So I would say that there is no difference in sort of pros and cons in which way you go. Do you create a brand character or are you the brand character, right? You can go either way. Sometimes having a mascot or like an animal or a character can help you, I think, more easily think of like memeing or comedic moments or helping come up with emojis. Having that level of separation personally, if you don't really feel as comfortable putting your face on everything, I would say make a brand character. The brand character gives you a level of separation and a level of flexibility. And the cool thing is, you can rebrand if you decide down the road that you don't like that brand character or it's not working out. You can always rebrand. You can't rebrand your face. Like if you use you as the brand, there's a limited amount of things you can do if you ever wanted to rebrand. And I know I'm talking about rebrands here. I'm sure you guys have seen brands do a rebrand before. They're extremely effective tools in terms of reinvigorating energy into your brand. And that's why you see companies do them a lot, but it's something that creators should think about too. Anytime you're going to go through and update your branding, you're technically doing a rebrand. And you want to think about how you're doing that and whether or not you can make bigger changes or what ways you can kind of introduce energy. So there's other things, like I said, I'm not going to go through every single element of story branding here. I just wanted to go through some critical ones so you guys can begin to think about your brand and is it a good brand? Does it tell a story? So some other things in this story, think about how a story arc goes. They need to go on a journey, right? So they have a villain, they have a external and internal struggle due to this villain, right? Normally these are your competitors or these can be major challenges brought on by an entity in your space. There's also a philosophical, you want to look for like a philosophical struggle. And much like Star Wars, let's use Star Wars as an example. You've got Luke Skywalker. He's got this struggle. He's got the villain, Darth Vader, the Empire, and he's going through the struggle with it. He eventually runs into a guide. So what is that guide in that story too? And you actually go through and write out this brand script so that you have an entire story. And in doing so, you end up defining your competitors, the major challenge that you're solving, which, by the way, is your value add. We've been talking about value episode after episode here, but one of the ways in which you can determine that, if you don't know, is figuring out what challenge you're solving. What's the major philosophical struggle that the people following your brand are having, right? And what are you solving for them by having this character that goes on kind of this journey? So brand scripting is one way to do it. Like I said, there's lots of ways to think about branding, but I want to talk about, let's say you've got an idea here, and let's change gears for a second. What do you do once you've got an idea? Where can you go to improve your branding? What do you need to do, right? Do you need to hire somebody? Do you need to Can you do it yourself? Does our article have anything else to say there?
Not necessarily on that, but that actually brings up a good question, because we may have contradicted ourselves, or I may be contradicting myself here, but I know in the show we've talked about how it's quantity over quality for the content you're putting out. Does the same actually apply to branding? Is it more, I mean, because at the same time, your branding is being used to pull in a new audience. So for the audience that's already there, I can understand why the videos you release and the content would have to be, quantity over quality. But the branding, the things that actually pull them in, would that make more sense to you to hire out, make it look a little bit nicer, which maybe you can do on your own?
Quality is not always the answer on the internet. As a general rule of thumb, I've seen really good branding done that's really low quality, but that's kind of the point. With the brand character. And normally in those situations, the brand tends to be a little bit more like meme-y. It tends to err closer to meme culture. And that allows it to have inherently lower quality. In fact, the lower quality can kind of give off that illusion that it is closer. But then you kind of have to back that up with your entertainment value, right? With the comedy and the jokes that you choose when you're actually on camera. I would say, kind of in converse to that, if you're going to do branding, be willing to pay a good designer to do really good branding, because they will be able to take the concepts that you give them, and they'll understand some of this stuff. They will understand a certain level of marketing. They will understand, okay, you need consistent branding across all different avenues. This is your brand character. Okay, I know how to turn that brand character into Twitch emojis for you, good ones that are going to be effective. You want to find designers that have experience in the creator industry and who have a marketing background, because they're going to be able to ask you the right questions. Let's say you don't really know, like maybe you haven't gone through story branding before. Like what you want to call your brand. You've come up with a name, but maybe you haven't really thought it through that much more, right? And if you don't have experience doing that, I think a good designer can kind of help you, because they're going to need inspiration. So they're going to say, well, can you at least show me examples of stuff that you like? And then normally you can go through the internet, comb around different brands that you like that have, and this is now I'm getting into the vision. And I think the vision is probably the most important thing in all of this. What does your brand look like? Like end goal, the best thing it can be. What does it look like in your own head? Vision's really, really important for marketing. Vision's important for creators too. You have to be able to visualize what this is all going to look like. So what are the key inspirations? Let me do an example here. When AWOL was doing his branding recently, and he got one of our great designer friends on board, Andy, and Andy will go through and ask him, what are your inspirations here? Can you send me certain ones? And so AWOL went through, he really liked and hopefully get him on the show and he could actually talk about it a little bit more. He should be back next week, but I know a little bit of it, so I can talk about it a little bit here, but he'll have more. But I know he wanted a cyberpunk kind of vibe to it. He wanted a not like higher tech necessarily, but futuristic at least. And so he went through and got screenshots from different games. He went through different concept arts. He looked through Cyberpunk 2077 a little bit, pulled out some imagery, and sent this to Andy. And then this allowed Andy to look at it and be like, okay, I've got some idea there. In different situations, he would ask more questions for more inspiration. So think about visually what your brand looks like. And this isn't just the avatars, the icons, the text. It's also just the world. Like, what is the world that your brand is in, right? Think about, if you kind of think about it in like an imaginary universe. This is a bit hard to describe, talking about vision. It is, I'm trying to think of one that we did. This wasn't AWOL's, but we did do another brand script, and I'm not going to name the client, but we were doing another kind of more futuristic, higher technological vibe that was also in the education space. So we wanted to try to imagine what universities would be like in the future and what this environment would look like. And obviously it doesn't exist yet. So we had to kind of come up with that and take examples of that. So we would actually like pull out university examples and kind of post them onto futuristic backdrops to at least get a visual idea, because I'm not a designer realistically, and neither is he. And this allowed us to kind of put together this like futuristic kind of educational brand world that we're building. This goes along with the brand character and the story brand script. When you're building a story, you're building a world, and that's how you need to think about your brand. What does the world of your ideal brand look like? Who are the characters? What's the environment? What's the setting? What's a day-to-day like? Is it always night? Is it sunny and bright all the time? Is it cheerful? Is it gloomy and dark and like foreboding? What are these characteristics? I could probably go into the weeds here more and more and more. Pull me out here, Ross. So what are some other things that we can think
this
about
is brilliant, man. I'm sitting here like, okay, I've heard this all before, but I'm still picking up on little things that you're saying. The third one, the third one, and this is actually a really good one because they actually have the perfect example of a story brand. And it's a story brand that went bad, but then they recovered, and they're actually a billion-dollar company now. Find your audience is the third one they have listed here when developing your brand. And this is a good point. You literally cannot tell a story if you don't know who you're talking to. I mean, I guess you can, but it's not going to be any good. So what the quote is, what do they value? What is the larger benefit that you're going to offer your audience? Not what will you help their life right now, but how will you allow them to improve their overall situation? Now, I believe, let me see if, yes, okay. The example here that they listed, Aaron, do you remember, I think it was back, was it this previous Christmas or this previous holiday season, the Peloton ads? The ones that were just like an absolute disaster. This guy, is essentially, it seemed like he was fat shaming his wife by getting her a Peloton. And that was the whole thing. And but it told the story. It told the story of this girl's journey from getting that to feeling better about herself. And even though it failed, but then they rebranded actually. And now they're a $4 billion company because of that rebrand.
Yeah, here's the thing. So I think like they conceptualized the brand well, but I think where they missed was the main brand character, which like I said, is like the most important part, right? I think they had like the story right, the arc right. They had like Peloton is the guide. Like look at how there's some story brand elements there, right? Who is the guide? Obviously, Peloton is the guide in that story, helping people along the journey of losing weight, right? But they didn't pick the right character. They didn't develop the main character well. Rebranding, and you guys have probably seen it from brands that you don't like, because this is there was a period of time, I think it was between the last 5 to 10 years, where rebranding was the new hot thing because it allowed you to kind of erase the past and start fresh, which is why it's super powerful. But it has a huge effect on any sort of brand. So if you're struggling and making your brand connect, or if you want to reinvigorate it and maybe give yourself some more energy and some enthusiasm about your brand, it's a really strong marketing technique that I think creators should employ more. There isn't really much to lose out of doing a rebrand other than the money and resources to help execute it and the time to execute it. But you don't really lose anything unless you had a really great brand before and you rebranded to something worse. I mean, I guess I've never seen that happen. I don't think. No, that's wrong. I've seen it happen before. But rebranding is a strong technique. I would wait to do it though. As creators, is when you have resources, when you've got the resources to get a really good designer on board, to hire one out, and to have them help walk you through the process. Hell, even you can actually hire story brand marketers to help you story brand your brand if you want, or you can try to learn how to do it yourself. There's a website. I actually don't know what it is. It's story brand. It might be storybrand.com. I think it is, but if you just look up story brand script, you'll find the website for it. There's a great book about it too, if you wanted to learn more and learn how to do it the whole way through. I don't know if that's completely necessary for creators to go through and learn the whole thing, but knowing some of it is certainly helpful. And I know it's helped myself. I know it's helped AWOL help brand for creators and for our different clients. Without me going more and more on there, I want to switch gears to see, are there other things we're asking creators here today? Is your brand actually good? So what is the measurement of that? How do you know when a brand is good versus when it's not?
Well, one of the other things they have listed on here when actually creating a brand, and this applies for what you just said too, and it's narrow your expertise and find your narrative on that expertise. We talk about it all the time about how you should be following, we don't say it all the time, but we've talked before about, the advantages and disadvantages of finding that niche to really get in and focus on. And so how are you displaying that in your brand? And then when you're finding this narrative for that, what is your narrative on that niche that is going to bring people in? So I think those are two very important things. I know for me, like when I'm branding myself, because one of my little side hustles is I work with comedians. I do social media marketing for comedians. And so by finding my little area of expertise, my niche was medium-sized comedians who aren't big yet, but have the potential to be. And then my narrative was I can help them get to that point where they're bigger. So that, that personally, that branding myself as that, the big guys, they don't need me. So I'm not going to waste my time there. The small people, unfortunately in comedy, they're unlikely to afford me. So by narrowing my niche and my narrative down to just that, it opened up a whole wide world of comedians and people to actually work with.
Yeah. Connecting to our last episode, or not the last one, but one of the previous ones where we're talking about you only need 100 true fans to be successful, right? You can really chisel down to a pretty refined niche now in the creator space. And the more defined that is, the easier it's going to be to define your brand around this thing. Now, you want to make sure it gives you some flexibility on what you can do with your brand and the content that you can create. But ultimately, you want to make sure that it's servicing an audience that exists. So the next step, and if we're asking, is your brand a good brand? First of all, does your brand tell a story? Does your brand have characters? This is stuff we talked about so far. What is the overall brand vision? Like, what is the scenario where someone coming through your brand ends in success? What does that success scenario look like? What is that vision? What is also a scenario where the people who don't interact with your brand end up? What is like the failure state for them? What does that vision look like? And then something so critical, and I've talked about this before, is audience development. Is there an audience that is interested or can relate or needs this story, that they need to go through this story journey? They need to experience this character's transformation from the beginning to the end state of the story. Is there an audience out there for that? And who is that audience? What are their characteristics? What are their needs? What are their challenges? Sometimes that can help you define what your brand's challenges are. And then I think the last thing to add here is, have you done any sort of competitor analysis? Whatever niche you choose, it's very, very likely you're going to have competitors. You're going to have other people doing something very, very similar in your space. It's going to be really rare that you're like the one unique person there. So who are your competitors, and in what ways are you able to pull audience from them? What are their weaknesses, right? Do a SWOT analysis, right? And we haven't gone through SWOT analysis yet. Maybe do an episode on that. You guys can let us know if you want one there. But
I love SWOT analysis.
Yeah, they're fun to do, and they're extremely helpful in terms of looking at your competitors and understanding, okay, there is an opportunity here. It actually helps you specifically define opportunities. That's what the O in SWOT is, opportunities. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Basically, that's it. That's a SWOT analysis in a nutshell. If you can categorize those different items for each of your competitors, you will know specifically what your advantages are. Those should also be part of your story for your brand that you're going after. That way you're picking up audience and you're picking up viewers from your competitors. So brand character, right? You got the brand character, the story, the challenge, the vision, your audience development, and your competitors. Does your brand consider all of these elements in this conceptualization? If so, then you've got a good brand. If not, you might want to work on it a little bit. There's stuff to do. You've got some work to do, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Anything else on our list? Did they have any other good ideas from the article?
They had the following two in this article for 8 ways to tell the most compelling brand story. They had keep it simple. They actually have a couple good examples on here. Like if you look at Apple's brand story, like they keep it incredibly simple and yet it's incredibly powerful and effective. And then being human, we talk about that all the time. You know, if you're there's really nothing else to add to that. Treat everybody like they're a human. Don't treat them like they're a dollar sign. That's essentially what that's saying. Treat them like they're human, like their problems are real, which they are, and which they need a solution to those problems, which they do, which you can then offer. That's essentially what they're saying there, I imagine.
Yeah, even if you go through the branding or like the story brand, and you make a character that's not a human, let's say it's an animal or something, you can still making that animal be human, have human elements, right? So, but also what Ross is saying, just being human in general yourself too, and understanding that your audience members are all human beings, except when they're bots. Bots aren't humans, but
except when they're bots.
That's the only exception.
Welcome to 2020, where that's legitimately true.
That's a whole different topic. We'll get into that later. I think we can probably wrap the episode there.
Yep, you can catch all of our replays over on YouTube. Just search Digital Drop Pod. If you'd like the audio version of the podcast, you can literally just search us and find us anywhere podcasts are played, from Apple to Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, wherever you want. Give us a 10-star or 5-star rating. We really appreciate that. And anyways, we will be back hopefully tomorrow. We'll see how getting set up goes.
We're just kind of going with the flow this week. So
we're going. We've got it down. We've got it down. AWOL will hopefully be back with us next week, or maybe even the end of this week. We'll see. But we will catch you on the flip side. Happy creating, everybody.